So, as I mentioned, I want to first start with the Memphis exhibition. So, that Memphis exhibition happened up in Huntsville on Monday evening, happened on ESPN Plus, and for the first half, it was a fairly normal exhibition. But during the game, Penny Hardaway and Nate Oates agreed to not have anyone foul out. And the broadcast made it sound like the original plan was that they were not going to tell the players that they could not foul out. And I think for the first half, it was kind of like that. Because like Cliff Amore, for example, for Alabama, got 2 fouls, ended up sitting a lot, or maybe got 3 and ended up sitting a good bit toward the end of that second half. And Nate Oates was kind of playing very similar to if he actually, was playing a legitimate game, versus it kind of felt like starting in the second half that the players very clearly knew that nobody could foul out, and it turned into a hack-a-shack fest, and it turned into completely just free throws. So it's hard to take too much out of this game when you get into the second half. I do think that there's some things that you can glean from the first half, and I think that the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, because I think Memphis started the game pretty poorly from shooting the ball. They had more fouls than they had made field goal attempts, and just it was a really ugly game early in that game for them. And I thought that Alabama, started kind of ugly. It was 5-4 early. Alabama hits a couple of threes to break it open to 11-4, and then Alabama was kind of in control for the rest of that first half. The first half ends and Alabama's up 49-29. And it really felt like, if you watch that Wake Forest game, that Alabama might just cruise to victory. And Nate kind of mentioned this when he went into his post game, and he said, obviously there's a reason we play these exhibitions. We can get exposed on what we need to work on. I thought we got exposed a little bit. We came out and gave up 16 points in the first 3 minutes of the second half. It was immature, and we just thought it was going to be easy, right? This was a situation where Alabama has the lead cut pretty early in that second half. Alabama was scoring points, so it wasn't like we were up 20 to just up 4. But, Alabama ends up losing a good bit of the lead that they had, and Memphis is being scrappy, right? And Nate makes a good point that Alabama really just thought it was going to be easy because of how much they were up in this game and how much they were up in the Wake Forest game. But when Memphis started to make shots, obviously that changes a little bit. So the final score in this one is 96-88. I know if you saw my preview, I said that if Alabama scored, 100 points or around 100 points, then, this offense could be absolutely insane. And I think that, you can partially glean that from this game, but I wouldn't say the final score is the reason you can glean that from this game. I would say the reason that you can say, hey, Alabama's offense may be super elite is Alabama's up 49-29, missing 3 starters, right? Keep in mind in this game, as I mentioned, there were 4 people out that will play contributing minutes this season. Aiden Sherrill's the only person that was out that's not projected to be a starter. And then you have Latrell Wrightsell, Grant Nelson, and Chris Youngblood. Chris Youngblood's the only one that will not play coming up Monday based on what we've heard from Nate Oates. Chris Youngblood's going to be out until the middle of December, but the other 3 guys should be back available starting Monday for the first game. So that's something really to note, is that Alabama scores 49 points. When they started slow in that first half, they score 49 points, and that just really shows the offensive output that this team can have. And a lot of that was because of transition, right? And part of defense, right? Darion Reed has a couple of cool, good blocks. Mo Diabate gets a steal, turns it into a dunk at the other end, right? Defense leading to offense is really at paramount when this team is playing at its best. I thought at moments in this game it was really sloppy. Memphis honestly felt like they were playing a March Madness game. There was a lot of full court pressure, a lot of getting up into us, more of what you see out of like a Houston or a Tennessee, which is good because Alabama is going to face those teams this year, and Alabama needs to know how to attack that. And it's good that some of our younger guys were able to see what that looks like in live game action, whether it be LeBaron Philon or Aiden Holloway, in this system, Darion Reed, because I thought that the turnover issue was partially caused by the fact that there were no fouls and the officials started, it was kind of a mixture of officials kept blowing the whistle because the fouls were so hard, but then they also swallowed the whistle at certain moments, which led to some additional turnovers. In the final box score in this one, Alabama ends up having, let's make sure I get this right. Alabama ends up committing 32 fouls, and Memphis has 34 fouls. Alabama does have a player in Cliff Amore that has 7, and Memphis has a guy with 8, right? So a little difficult to fully glean that. That's what I've been talking about. Another thing also to mention is Alabama does have 20 turnovers in this game versus Memphis has just 15. I think part of that has to do with the fact that Memphis really got into us. 11 of those turnovers were in the first half, and Memphis really got into us and sped us up, but not in a way that Alabama wants to be sped up, right? Alabama plays fast, but they play in control when they play fast. And Memphis at times, when they were doing the full court pressure, it really felt like they were speeding up our younger guys, faster than they were ready to go. So Darion Reed ends up having, let's see, he ended up having 5 turnovers in this game. Mark Sears has 6 turnovers in the game. Philon has 3, right? We talked about that after the Memphis game, but that's something that continued in this game. I think this is, partially a fashion of the guys that have the ball and that were being pressured on the ball, based on how Memphis was playing the game. I think part of it may be, just getting used to the new system. But that is what happened, and we will glean what we can from it, but I would not take it to the bank that when Alabama is playing in true game action, I'm not expecting 6 turnovers out of Mark Sears. I'm not expecting 5 turnovers out of Darion Reed. Might it happen? Sure, but I don't think that that's something that we should come to expect out of those guys. Somebody that played an elite game, if we're going to kind of go through the individual contributors that just had elite games, LeBaron Philon, right? We've talked a little bit about him. He is an Alabama kid and is a freshman. And the idea coming into this season, and part of the reason, honestly, why Alabama was not as high on recruiting him, because by all accounts, we had heard he was somebody that was very interested in coming to Alabama. Most of his recruitment was that the staff was concerned about his defense. Well, I will say that he is somebody that has kind of swelled that completely. The intensity which he plays with on the defensive end, as well as just rebounding and the effort plays that Philon gives you, have been incredible. The ball seems to find him. In this game, he ends up having 17 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. He does get a block and a steal to go with it, right? He just seemed to be in the right place at the right time. He goes 2 for 5 from 3, which will take 40% all day. At the end of the day, he just was a very, very consistent player, and he is somebody that seems to play very well in Nate's offense, and you could argue is going to be one of the better perimeter defenders that Alabama has from the guard position, very similar to like what you get out of Latrell Wrightsell. In my opinion, the defense you get out of those two guys is very, very similar, and that's great because Alabama obviously is going to have some lineups where I think they're going to throw, multiple guards out there. And so a Philon or Latrell Wrightsell is going to have to be guarding a 2 or a 3 fairly often. Obviously a 2, their natural position, but I think they're going to be guarding some 3s as well if they throw a multi-guard lineup out there. Another guy that I want to talk about in this one, obviously you got Mark Sears and Cliff Amore. We've talked a lot about them in the offseason. Both of them, Sears ends up with 20 points. He does have the 6 turnovers. Like I said, not expecting the 6 turnovers super often, but he does have 3 steals, right? So he was getting sped up himself, partially due to how Memphis was getting into him, but I think that he also was doing a good job on the defensive end. Cliff Amore, has a double-double, 10 and 10. He's somebody that I think will end up getting points just through the nature of the offense. There was some really, really good pick and roll and 2-man game that we saw with him and Darion Reed, as well as just blocks, cleaning up the rebounds. I think that he's going to be an animal kind of all around the rim, and his points are just going to come by way of cleaning things up and, easy rolls to the basket. If you're curious and seeing it in those videos, I would check out Blake Byler over on Twitter. He does a really good job talking about, or putting together the videos and grabbing videos and talking about what's happening kind of post game. There's quite a few videos he's put out about this game and things that he noticed after watching it. So I'd really check those out if you are interested in kind of more details about that. A guy that we talked about last game, and I tweeted about it, so if you follow me on Twitter, you've already seen it, but that I feel like has to be mentioned in this game. And he actually only played 16 minutes, but it's Mohamed Diabate. He's somebody that last season, for anybody that was on the podcast or on the post-game spaces or pre-game spaces or anything with Joe Corona and, Sykes and everybody, that Corona often would talk about we need more minutes from Mo Diabate. And we agreed in principle last season, but it was very difficult to see where the minutes going to come from, right? Because Diabate was somebody that last season, especially, his offense was so far behind his defense that it was a liability when putting him out there because he was the only guy giving us any defense. Corona's opinion was, hey, you need somebody for defense, and you definitely saw that in the Grand Canyon games, and there were moments last season in which that absolutely mattered. But on a game-in, game-out basis, it was hard to put him out there just due to the nature of how last season's team worked. Well, Diabate this season has clearly shown that he has worked on his shot. And in 16 minutes, he ends up with 11 points. He has 11 points. He goes 2 of 3 from the field, including 1 of 1 from 3, and 6 of 8 from the line. And gets 8 rebounds, right? 11 points, 8 rebounds in just 16 minutes, including the 1 of 1 from 3. And what I kind of said is that if his shooting and his finishing around the rim and free throws, quite frankly, if all of that is increasing at a level, if we can extrapolate these first 2 exhibitions in what we potentially will see out of Mo Diabate this season, it will be almost impossible to keep him off the court, right? Nick Kelly tweeted something similar. It's like, we're looking at where minutes going to come on this team. He's going to have minutes, right? He does all the blue-collar stuff. He's in there when it comes to creating turnovers, getting blocked, steals. Again, he has a steal turning into a dunk in this game. He is incredible he ends up tied for the offensive rebounding lead, even though he had the, third lowest minutes on this entire team. And this is something that, like I said, Mo Diabate, in my opinion, is somebody that absolutely will have his minutes carved out for him because of what he can do on the defensive end. And at this point, his offense, from what we have seen, his offense and his shot looks so much better than it did last year that he's going to have minutes, right? He's going to get the minutes, and well worth it because he has looked absolutely incredible in these first 2 games. His ability to take the shots from 3 and make them. We're not expecting him to shoot 5 threes in a game, but the perfect example is in this game. It was a break ahead. Mo Diabate gets it passed up to him. Last season, he wasn't confident or comfortable enough to take that 3. He puts it on the floor, and then maybe he gets fouled, goes 1 for 2 from the free throw line or whatever. Maybe he can finish at the rim. But this season, he hits the wide open 3, nothing but net, and, you kind of move on with your day. And I think that's the benefit to having Mo Diabate do that, is that when Alabama gets in its true flow game, he has the ability, when the ball's in his hands, to put up the shot if it finds him and the moment is right. Or, obviously, he has the ability to put the ball on the floor. His handling for his size is absolutely great. He does a really good job finding the open man. His assist numbers, by and large, have always been very, very good. And I think that he's somebody that will contribute at a pretty high clip for this game, or for this team. So those are the guys I really wanted to talk about. Like I said, there definitely were things that we can talk about from all the different players, but those are kind of the big ones that I think I wanted to talk about in this game. If you did watch it, as I said, Alabama wins 96-88. It was a very long game that had 96 free throws. It ended up being over 2.5 hours due to the no foul thing, or no foul out thing. I understand why they did it, but it really led to the second half being almost unwatchable. It was just a free throw shooting contest. There was not much basketball to be seen. And that was really disheartening because in the first half, I think you really did see some things out of Alabama that, as Nate mentioned, was a very good thing, because it was his other quote was that it's really beneficial to play a team like that. We're going to play Houston. We're going to play Tennessee, and we didn't handle their physicality well. We're going to have to improve in that area before we play those teams. And that's something that we've talked about with Nate Oates' teams, right? Tennessee has done a very good job against Nate Oates, and a lot of it is because of their physicality, right? Getting up into his teams and such like that. I think that part of that, could have been helped if you have your Chris Youngbloods and Latrell Wrightsell and Grant Nelson, when you have some of the more veteran guys that are used to handling this. But I think that was honestly a benefit to not have those guys, because you really got all of your younger guys that real game environment of what it feels like to be in that atmosphere, versus your other guys that were out in this game have already experienced it, right? They saw Tennessee last season, and they have played in a lot of games, as all of them are fifth-year guys. So this is a standpoint that I just think that it is a much better standpoint for your younger guys to have played against Memphis and understand this is what it really feels like to be sped up. This is what the physicality of actual college basketball is. Because in most cases, a lot of these guys were either transfers or freshmen that were getting a lot of time in this game, outside of obviously Mark Sears and Amori. So that's what I have to say about the Memphis game. Like I said, I really appreciate Nate, lining these up, playing tough teams. Obviously, this being broadcast on ESPN Plus was great. We could actually see it. I thought that, for what it was, next round was fine in commentary. They're not, play-by-play and color commentary guys. So if that's what you were expecting, that's just not what you should have been looking for. These are radio broadcast guys, so I didn't have any issue with what they were saying. There were mispronounces and not knowing who was what, and there were moments where it was just very obvious that these were not, typical basketball color guys, and that's completely fine. I don't have any issue with it. Just glad to be able to see the exhibition and not, for anybody that watched a couple of years ago, we got to watch a Twitch stream of, Alabama playing because the foreign tour was not anywhere, right? So I'm just thankful to be able to actually see these games because I was not in person, and see what we can glean from these games. So that's kind of what my thoughts are on the game. So we will transition